Just 1 week ago, people in London were lying on the grass in Hyde Park, soaking up temperatures that hadn't been seen in over 100 years of recorded history. The sky was electric blue, the air was thick and dry, and the whole city felt like it had been transported straight to the Mediterranean coast. And then, almost overnight, everything changed. What happened next wasn't just a change in weather, it was nature throwing a full-scale assault on a city that had barely recovered from the most intense heat wave ever recorded in May. Giant hailstones, roaring thunderstorms, streets turned into rivers, and an atmosphere so explosive that meteorologists struggled to find the right words to describe what was building in the sky above England. If you think you've seen wild weather before, you have absolutely no idea what London just went through, and the science behind it is even more terrifying than the storm itself. Let's go back to where this story begins. On the 25th of May, 2026, Kew Gardens in southwest London recorded a temperature of 34.8 degrees Celsius, obliterating the previous UK record for the hottest May day. That record was over a century old, and it didn't last 24 hours. The very next day, on the 26th of May, temperatures at the same location climbed even higher to 35.1 degrees Celsius, smashing the brand new record that had just been set the day before. London had just experienced 2 consecutive record-breaking days in a single heat wave, and the city was completely overwhelmed. This wasn't just hot for England. This was historically, dangerously, almost incomprehensibly hot for a country that sits at roughly the same latitude as parts of Canada. Meteorologist Tom Morgan from the Met Office described the temperatures as historic, saying that the UK rarely even sees temperatures above 35 degrees during full summer months, let alone in May, when people are still wearing light jackets. The Amber Heat Health Alert issued by the UK Health Security Agency covered every single region of England simultaneously. That kind of blanket emergency alert is extraordinarily rare and signals that the heat isn't just uncomfortable. It's a threat to human life. And tragically, it was. During the course of the heat wave, at least 15 people died. 13 of those deaths were linked to water. People rushing to rivers, lakes, and reservoirs to cool down, only to find that open water is far colder and more dangerous than it looks on a scorching day. 9 of the 13 who died in water were children. Let that number sit for a moment. 9 children. The Royal Life Saving Society issued an emergency public warning, begging families to stay away from open water as the death toll continued to rise. Meanwhile, London itself was baking in conditions that felt more like Dubai than Britain. Overnight temperatures at Kenley Airfield on the 26th of May didn't drop below 21.3 degrees Celsius, a figure that broke the all-time record for the highest overnight. Minimum temperature ever recorded in May across the entire United Kingdom. People couldn't sleep. Hospitals were strained. Emergency services were stretched across the entire country. The city was reaching its absolute limit, and that's precisely when the atmosphere decided it was time to fight back. Like and subscribe for more incredible weather events like this one. You do not want to miss what comes next. Here is something that most people don't realize about extreme heat waves. They are not just a sign of hot weather. They are a sign of an atmosphere storing enormous amounts of energy. Every degree of extra heat pumps more moisture and more instability into the air above. Scientists use a measurement called CAPE, Convective Available Potential Energy, to track how explosive the atmosphere has become. During the UK heat wave of 2026, meteorologists described the energy building in the atmosphere as comparable to the force of a detonating explosive. The amount of heat and humidity being pumped into the sky was essentially loading the atmosphere like a coiled spring, and it was only a matter of time before it snapped. When the thunderstorms came, they didn't arrive quietly. The Met Office had already issued yellow thunderstorm warnings across London and large swaths of southern England, warning of torrential rain, large hail, frequent lightning, and powerful gusting winds. Forecasters used language that was strikingly blunt. SOM areas could see 40 to 60 millimeters of rainfall in under 2 hours. To put that in context, the average total rainfall for the entire month of July in London is around 45 millimeters. What the storms were threatening to deliver in less than 2 hours was almost equivalent to a full month's worth of rain. The science of why this happens is fascinating and deeply important. When a period of extreme heat comes to an end in a country like England, it doesn't simply fade away. Instead, the superheated air near the ground collides violently with cooler Atlantic systems pushing in from the west. This collision creates intense convective activity, powerful updrafts that shoot warm, moist air high into the atmosphere at incredible speed. The higher that warm air travels, the more it cools, and as it cools, water vapor condenses into massive cumulonimbus clouds, the towering anvil-shaped monsters that produce the most violent weather on Earth. Inside those clouds, ice crystals collide repeatedly, building up enormous electrical charges that eventually discharge as lightning. And the same updrafts that power The storm also carried water droplets upward repeatedly, coating them in layer after layer of ice, creating hailstones that grow to extraordinary sizes before they finally become too heavy for the storm to hold. That is exactly what happened to parts of England in scenes that left residents stunned and terrified. In Kibworth Beauchamp, a village in Leicestershire, hailstones the size of golf balls, 3 to 5 centimeters across, rained down on homes, gardens, and parked cars. One resident described standing at her window watching her children play in a paddling pool in gloriously hot sunshine, and then, within minutes, watching giant lumps of ice thunder down from a sky that had turned completely black. Cars were dented beyond repair. Windows were smashed. A local care home was inundated with 8 inches of floodwater after the drainage systems were completely overwhelmed, and staff had to evacuate elderly residents to the upper floors while waiting for the fire brigade to pump out the car park. One witness described the hailstorm as absolutely terrifying. Like and subscribe, because this is just the beginning of what the storms did. In London itself, the aftermath was dramatic and deeply disruptive. Flash floods submerged roads across the capital as drainage systems built for normal British rainfall had absolutely no capacity to handle the volume of water being dumped in such a short period of time. Cars were stranded on major roads, including the A406 North Circular. The Blackwall Tunnel beneath the Thames had to be closed in both directions. 8 London Underground stations were shut due to flooding, leaving thousands of commuters stranded across the network. Major transport arteries ground to a halt as the same city that had been baking in record heat just days before now resembled a partially submerged obstacle course. Victoria Station, one of the busiest transport hubs in Europe, had water cascading down the slopes toward its eastern concourse. Shops and platforms were forced to shut temporarily. At the Almeida Theatre in Islington, water began leaking through the roof during a live performance, and the audience had to be evacuated as floodwater spread across the stage. In St. James's Park, right in the heart of central London, 41.8 millimeters of rain fell in a single day, nearly the entire expected rainfall for the month of July, delivered in less than 24 hours. The East Coast Main Line, one of the UK's most critical rail routes connecting London to Edinburgh and the rest of Scotland, was thrown into chaos when lightning strikes damaged signalling equipment between York and Leeds. Trains couldn't run for several hours. Dozens of services were cancelled. London North Eastern Railway, which operates between London King's Cross and northern Scotland, advised passengers not to travel at all. Transpennine Express, Northern Rail, and cross-country services were all simultaneously disrupted. At Leeds Station, police officers were deployed to hold back crowds of passengers desperate to get onto already delayed platforms. And all of this was unfolding against the backdrop of ground that was parched, cracked, and completely unable to absorb water at any meaningful rate. Scientists had been warning about this specific danger for years. When the Earth is baked dry by prolonged heat and drought, its surface becomes almost like baked clay, hard, sealed, and hydrophobic. Water doesn't sink in gradually the way it would after normal rainfall. Instead, it runs off the surface at high speed, following gravity into streets, underpasses, and river channels. Researchers from the University of Reading demonstrated this phenomenon with a striking experiment. Water poured onto dry, drought-hardened soil simply sat on top and ran sideways, while the same amount of water poured onto normally moist soil vanished almost immediately. This is why flooding after a heat wave is so much more severe than flooding after ordinary wet weather. The ground itself has forgotten how to drink. Like and subscribe. The climate connection here is one that affects every single one of us. The Met Office issued warnings not just for one round of storms, but for multiple waves of severe weather. Forecasters described 3 distinct rounds of thunderstorm activity sweeping through southern England and Wales. Between Wednesday evening and Friday morning, some areas were at risk of 30 millimeters of rain falling within a single hour, and up to 60 millimeters over a 3-hour period. These aren't just inconvenient numbers. At those rainfall rates, surface flooding becomes almost inevitable in urban areas, and the risk of landslides increases dramatically on slopes and embankments. Power cuts became a real concern as lightning threatened electrical infrastructure. Homes and businesses in low-lying areas were warned they could flood quickly, with little warning. What made this sequence of events particularly striking, and scientifically important, is the brutal speed of the transition. Within the space of roughly 1 week, London went from recording the hottest May temperatures in over a century to being battered by some of the most violent thunderstorms seen in years. That kind of whiplash weather is not normal. It is not random. And it is not a coincidence. Climate scientists have been warning for over a decade that as global temperatures rise, the contrast between extreme heat events and the severe storms that follow them will grow sharper and more dramatic. A warmer atmosphere holds more water vapor. More water vapor means more energy. More energy means that when storms do form, they form faster, grow larger, and produce more extreme rainfall, more powerful lightning, and more destructive hail than they would have in a cooler climate. The UK's Met Office has confirmed that spring 2026 was part of an extraordinary run of record-breaking warm weather across the country. Britain experienced multiple back-to-back heat waves, with temperatures consistently above seasonal averages and rainfall dramatically below normal for extended periods. Met Office scientist Emily Carlisle noted that the combination of prolonged warmth, record sunshine, and very low rainfall during this period reflects exactly the kind of changes that climate models have been predicting, with more extreme conditions, including longer dry spells, followed by intense rainfall events, becoming increasingly frequent across the British Isles. And yet, even knowing all of this, even understanding the science, there is something viscerally shocking about watching a city roast in 35-degree heat one week and then seeing its streets turned into rivers the next. Londoners who lived through both events described a sense of total disorientation, not just physical, but psychological. One week, you're carrying a fan and sleeping with every window open, desperate for a single degree of coolness. The next week, you're watching hailstones smash your car windows and checking whether your basement has flooded. The phrase, "what a difference a week makes," doesn't quite capture it. It would be more accurate to say, what a difference a week makes when the climate itself is rewriting the rules. The damage left behind by the storms was significant and widespread. Care homes flooded, transport networks crippled, roads closed, lightning strikes knocking out critical infrastructure, and thousands of people left stranded across a city that had already been pushed to exhaustion by the heat that came before. Emergency services responded heroically, but the sheer scale and speed of the events stretched resources across the entire system simultaneously, and forecasters warned that this would not be the last time such a sequence would unfold, because here's the truth that no weather report can fully convey. What London experienced in the final days of May and the first days of June 2026 was not a freak accident. It was a preview. It was the climate system demonstrating, in the most dramatic terms possible, what happens when decades of carbon emissions push the atmosphere beyond its natural limits. The energy has to go somewhere. The water vapor has to release. And when it does so with a ferocity that leaves cities flooded, commuters stranded, cars dented by ice falling from the sky, and millions of people staring out of their windows wondering what on earth just happened to their world. Like and subscribe, because understanding events like this one matters more now than it ever has before. London has always had unpredictable weather, but what it is experiencing now is something different, something fiercer, faster, and more extreme than the generations who built this city ever could have imagined. The heat wave that shattered a century of records was followed not by a gentle return to normal, but by an atmosphere unleashing everything it had been storing during those burning, breathless days of record heat. Giant hail, roaring thunder, flooded streets, and a single haunting question hanging over everything. If this is what May looks like now, what does July bring? The answer, according to every major climate body tracking the UK's weather patterns, is more of the same, and worse. The atmosphere is not resetting back to the mild, grey Britain that people romanticize. It is moving to a new baseline where the extremes are higher, the storms are stronger, and the gap between burning heat and violent deluge is measured not in months, but in days. Every resident of London, every city planner, and every emergency coordinator will need to reckon with that reality, because May 2026 made one thing absolutely clear. The old playbook no longer applies. Nature has rewritten the rules, and the storms over London were its loudest announcement yet.